I'm Teisha Bader. Thank you for joining me. Well, after some 15 months, Israel and terror group Hamas reached a ceasefire hostage release deal, a three-phase agreement that will, in its first phase, reportedly see the release of 33 hostages over the course of 6 weeks, and hopefully see the return of all the hostages at the end of the second and third phases of the agreement, the living and the dead. 98 hostages remain held in captivity in Gaza, brutally abducted during the October 7th Hamas massacre. And Jewish organizations welcomed the news of the hostage release ceasefire deal with hope and perhaps cautious optimism that Hamas will uphold its commitments under the agreement and that indeed we will see the return of all of the hostages home. Eric Fingerhut is president and CEO of the Jewish Federations of North America, which has been tirelessly doing its part since the October 7th massacre in emergency funding for Israel support and advocacy. And he joins us now to discuss this latest news, major development. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, and I do want to mention we are taping this just hours after President Joe Biden made the announcement from the White House of the agreement. We still haven't had official word from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from Israel, but the understanding is that the Israeli cabinet will be meeting on this tomorrow morning and is expected to approve the deal. So this is all just very new and very fluid, and my heart is still racing from what's been happening because, as I mentioned, we've all been waiting and hoping and praying for this news, and at the same time, it's we want to celebrate, but it's hard to celebrate until everybody is home.
100%. Everything you said, I agree with. And we even the pain of this spreading out over 6 weeks and longer is hard to comprehend, right? Because on one hand, we'll be so our hearts will be so full when we see the first hostages come home, God willing, this Sunday. But knowing that the others are there, they could be released immediately. Why can't they? It's so hard to. It's so hard to comprehend this, but yet we understand that that people have been working on this very diligently. Israeli government, the American government, really pretty kind of extraordinary when you see the outgoing Biden administration, the incoming Trump administration working together as they did. This is very unusual. This typically does not happen. The idea that the incoming administration actually had a seat at the table even before they took office is actually quite against what America's historical precedent is. We have one president at a time. We have one administration at a time. So there's been extraordinary efforts. And I think those of us who are not in those rooms have to trust that truly this was the best way to get our hostages home, which we desperately desire, and at the same time to allow Israel to continue to protect and defend itself to the fullest possible sense. We trust that that's the objective of Prime Minister Netanyahu and the government, and so again, they must have also reached the conclusion, as they did in that first round that occurred early in this crisis, that this was an acceptable way for Israel to, God willing, bring home its hostages.
Yeah, and as you said, there's clearly so much behind the scenes that we don't know about, right? We hear what we're able to hear, what is made public. This is such a sensitive and complex issue, to say the least. So there's a lot we don't know, but from what we do know, it does seem like, as you said, this was the best we could get. And
there's no right and wrong. People we like to present things as black and white, but of course this is not black and white. I think, all your listeners, viewers understand this incredible dilemma that Israel was put in because of the hostages. We've experienced this before with other hostages that have been taken and prisoner exchanges that have occurred as a result. And of course, this is particularly horrific because we know what these people are capable of. We know how they've treated our hostages. Of course, we know how they brutalized people on October 7th. We saw the murder, the 6 in the tunnel, including Hirsch Goldberg Poland and Carmel Gott and that those 6 who we mourn. And so knowing what can happen to what is happening to these victims, again, there's not an easy answer here, but we trust that those who are looking out for the interests of the state of Israel and the Jewish people have made the appropriate balance and will be overwhelmed, of course, with love to see the hostages come home.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Eric, it's a difficult thing. Obviously, Israel has to give an incredible amount on its part, releasing hundreds of Palestinian security prisoners. We don't have exact numbers, but as you said, this has been the case with Gilad Shalit. We saw this for one Israeli hostage, hundreds of Palestinian security prisoners released. It's a dilemma that most countries never have to face, and Israel has often had to face, and it's excruciating. But this is what it is.
We have you have the prisoner exchange, prisoner release here, but also it's not a prisoner exchange, a prisoner release. But you also have, of course, the phased withdrawals or ceasefire from parts of Gaza that our soldiers, our chayalim, fell in battle to attain, and that's also very difficult to grasp. But again, we know that the military leaders they understand what the price is here and feel confident that they can either regain ground or protect from a different vantage point, and we have to trust that as well. We really have no choice here, and so we need to be strong as a people. We need to know that the days ahead, not just bringing home the hostages, does not end this crisis. It doesn't end. It won't end the war. No matter what the language is used in the agreement, we know that that Hamas does not isn't going to lay down arms or give up its hope to bring further harm to Israel and Jewish people. We know that's true in other parts of the Middle East too. So we're just I think we have a very realistic view of the days and months and years ahead of us.
And Eric, I know obviously this is personal for all of us, right? Even people who don't know anyone in Israel, these are our brothers and sisters. No matter how you look at it, this is our family. And for those of us with family and with friends in Israel, it's equally as difficult. I know you've made several trips to Israel since October the 7th. You have a very close personal connection. Just talk to us a bit about that. And with that in mind, how you received this news today and what you're feeling personally.
Actually, I'll say even more recently. I just returned from Atlanta, where we had our International Lion of Judah conference. For those among your listeners who may know, the Lion of Judah is one of the oldest and largest philanthropic societies. It's women philanthropists who give a certain amount of funds every year. The total amount represented in the room, at this year's campaigns was over $250 million. Wow. There were I think 1,700 women there. And we had invited, and they came, some of the hostage families. Viva Siegel, the wife of Keith Siegel, she had been a hostage released in the first round, but Keith has been held, and she's advocating for Keith as well as for all the others. And Rachel and John Goldberg Poland were there, and of course the mothers of Hirsch. And somebody who's become particularly close to Maya Roman, who's a relative of Carmel Gott, who was murdered in the tunnel, but also of Yarden, who had been a hostage and was released in the first round. But Maya has been such an articulate spokesperson. I've personally gone with her to the United States Congress to meet with senators and representatives, and have seen how beautifully she advocates on behalf of her family and the Jewish people. And so we were with them as these negotiations were, rolling out, and as our phones are pinging with the updates, and just the emotion of being in the room with them, and in the hotel with them at this time. And obviously they're torn. Both, of course, they're relieved, assuming this comes to fruition, and they are released. But they know that it's too late for some of their relatives, including, of course, for Hirsch and Carmel, and of blessed memory. And also they know that whatever deal, there's going to be still some hostages there. I mean, even if the 6 weeks goes smoothly, that's still not all, right? There's still then the next round of negotiations, and so all of this is just beyond painful for everyone. But yes, I've having gotten to know them and see them and visit with them in so many different circumstances, the strength that it takes for them to continue to move forward. And it's unlike anything that none of us could have possibly experienced what they're experiencing. So we look forward to them being able to hug their loved ones, and to But we also know the other thing we know is that, of course, the condition they're going to be in is going to be deeply, deeply difficult, physically, mentally. It's impossible to imagine. And so the road to recovery, even after knowing at least they're alive, the road to recovery is going to be very long.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned the Lions of Judah. I actually reported yesterday in my newscast that you honored Israel's First Lady, Michal Herzog, with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award, and Rachel Goldberg Polin was honored with a special award as well. And I mean, you talk about human spirit and resilience. She, has become this symbol for all of us. And you mentioned some of the other hostage families, all of them. I just, as you said, it's incomprehensible as a human to experience what they have experienced, and for them to find the strength each day to continue on and continue fighting for their loved ones is just, it's beyond.
Well, and you're certainly right about Rachel, and she carries herself with such dignity and poise and warmth, that for her to be the face of the Jewish people to the world in this crisis has done such credit to all of us, and how she does it in this moment, I can't imagine, but she does it. And to be able to honor First Lady Herzog, Michal Herzog, the First Lady and the President have been extraordinary in this time. And they've met with every family over and over again. They've traveled. One of the stories that I just can't ever get out of my mind is on the first anniversary of October 7th, there was a ceremony at the Nova site early at the time when the attack occurred at 6:30 a.m. And all the families who lost, these beautiful young people were there, and the President and the First Lady were there, and they went family to family, hugging them, listening to their stories, talking to them, and never went to the microphone. They didn't speak. They weren't on the program. They didn't make a ceremony. They just, can you imagine what other time in history, another place, it's the President and the First Lady of the nation come to a ceremony like that and not even want to say a word, just want to embrace each family. That's who they are. And they've been like this, obviously they've been doing this every day since October 7th. And we were really honored to be able to recognize her.
A beautiful thing. And I want to get back to something you said, this truly historical, remarkable moment. As you mentioned, we have an outgoing administration and an incoming administration here in the United States. And again, there was a lot happening behind the scenes. We don't know who, what, but we know that in this time of transition, which can be really, really tricky, the teams of these two administrations clearly were able to reach this milestone with joint efforts. And that really is something that is quite out of the ordinary.
It's a tribute to them both, and they've been publicly they've been publicly acknowledging it. I mean, the Biden team publicly acknowledged the role the Trump team is playing. This is very, I mean, again, anybody who knows American government and history, this is very, very unusual. And again, it shows the character of both of those teams. By the way, the same thing's happening in Israel, in the sense that we know, of course, that there are divisions within the governing coalition that's led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, but that he has members of his coalition who are against the deal. And the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, as you certainly know, stepped up and said, "We'll give you what they call a safety net. We'll support this and not bring the government down. If your own faction doesn't, isn't able to put it over the top." That also is very unusual in politics, right? Usually it's moments like this that bring governments down. And of course, the job, I was in the legislature in Ohio and in the House of Representatives in Washington. And, the job of the opposition leader is to become the majority, right? The job of the minority is to become the minority. That's what you do. And yet here you have the opposition leader, the minority leader in Israel saying, "No, we will support this, give you the votes needed, and we won't bring you down over it." Even though we could. And that also shows that a rising to the historical moment that we're in.
Absolutely. And also that perhaps some things do supersede politics, that this issue is the critical, this is a human, this is a survival, a life issue. Right. And if this isn't above politics, then what is?
I agree with that, and I really do think. Look, even those who oppose this agreement, I think that that they are sincere in their belief that they weigh the balance a different way, and I think we should treat that opinion with respect, even if we disagree with it, as I do. But everybody here is I think is doing what they think is right, and thank goodness that's going to lead, hopefully, to us bringing our hostages home.
I do want to mention the IDF because, as you mentioned, with Israeli troops having to withdraw partially and then completely in the various phases of this deal, it is painful as well because so many have given their lives searching for the hostages in Gaza, dealing with, combating the terrorists in Gaza who just want to see more and more destruction. So that's very difficult. And at the same time, the IDF posted today on their platform on social media the name of their mission to prepare for the return of the hostages. And the mission is called Wings of Hope and Wings of Freedom, sorry. And the comment from the IDF on their own post was, "This is what we have been fighting for."
That's beautiful. I didn't see that. Thank you for sharing that. And I've spoken, as I'm sure of you, to many military leaders in Israel over these weeks and months, and they were ready to make the military sacrifices necessary, both to go to try to save them, and knowing that they have not been able to save them militarily, to be able to, they're willing to make the compromises that are necessary, really almost to a person. I've not heard any dissension on that point from the military leaders. They're confident they'll be able to go back and do what they need to do, if they have to do it. So it's a beautiful message. And I think it actually goes even further, which is they recognize that even if they achieved complete military victory in the sense of just, Hamas being, fully eradicated, if they don't bring the hostages back, then if we don't all bring the hostages back, that it will be a wound in the heart of the country and the heart of the people. I mean, people really, I've heard it described that way, that people saying we'll never be the same again if we, if we don't take every opportunity to bring them back. Now, I'm sure that's just a feeling of trauma at the moment, and of course, everything heals over time. But the feeling is very, very deep in this way, and it's really across the board, and including, obviously, as you pointed out, the military people who will take these risks, and maybe their risks will go up, and we all acknowledge their risks may go up, as a result of this deal. But they're willing to take that risk because of how much they value and balance the saving of human life here.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the work that federations have been doing always, but certainly since day one after October the 7th. It has been nonstop as so many Jewish organizations here in the U.S. have come together in this one goal, this one mission. And we all, I don't like to say any silver lining in this horrific tragedy of October the 7th, but the reality is that I feel, and I think you feel too, that we as Jews feel more connected to one another and to our brothers and sisters in Israel than ever before. And I hope that we can continue that going forward in this very difficult process, as you said, welcoming home those that come back alive. And we hope that is the majority, and laying to rest those who are no longer alive, and rehabilitating and helping those who do come back alive to recover, continuing to support and advocate for Israel and for the Jewish people as a whole.
I feel that way, and I thank you for the important role you're playing to help us all communicate with each other and stay united. And that Bezrat Hashem will hear only, God willing, will hear only good news in the coming days.
Amen, amen. Thank you to that. Amen.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Eric. Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.